Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The stench hit them first. A mixture of decay, blood, and something else, something far worse than any veteran investigator had ever encountered. It was September 2013, and a team of Brazilian federal agents stood outside the concrete walls of Pedrinhas Prison in São Luís, Maranhão. They weren't there for a routine inspection. They were there because 60 inmates had been murdered in the last year alone, and nobody, not the guards, not the warden, not even the state government, seemed willing or able to stop it. Inside those walls, the rules of civilization had collapsed. What remained was a war zone where two rival gangs, the Band dos 40 and the Anjo da Morte, controlled everything. They controlled the weapons. They controlled the drugs. They controlled who lived and who died. The guards had long since given up trying to maintain order. They simply locked the gates at night and prayed they'd still be alive in the morning. Agent Rafael Mendes was chosen to lead the investigation, not because he wanted to, but because nobody else would take the assignment. Pedrinhas had a reputation. Officers who got too close to the truth had a way of disappearing. Their families received threats. Their homes were burned. But Mendes had a daughter, and when he looked at the crime scene photos, when he saw the mutilated bodies, the severed heads displayed like trophies, he couldn't turn away. Someone had to stop this. The first body they found belonged to a 22-year-old named Lucas Ferreira. He'd been serving a 3-year sentence for petty theft. His crime didn't warrant a death sentence, but inside Pedrinhas, your sentence didn't matter. What mattered was which gang you belonged to. Lucas had refused to join either side. That decision cost him everything. They discovered him in the showers, his body so badly mutilated that dental records were needed for identification. His hands had been removed. His eyes gouged out. And carved into his chest were 3 letters, BDQ, Band dos 40. It was a message, a warning to anyone else who thought they could remain neutral in this war. But Lucas wasn't the only victim. As Mendes and his team began digging deeper, they uncovered a pattern of violence so systematic, so organized, that it couldn't be random. The killings happened on specific dates. Always during shift changes. Always when certain guards were on duty. The more they investigated, the clearer it became that this wasn't just gang warfare. This was something far more sinister. One of the prison's former guards agreed to speak with Mendes, but only in secret, only in a location far from the prison. His name was João Silva, and he'd worked at Pedrinhas for 8 years before requesting a transfer. When they met in a dimly lit cafe 200 miles from São Luís, João's hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. "You don't understand what that place really is," João whispered, his eyes darting around the room as if someone might be listening. "The gangs, they're not the ones in control. They never were." Mendes leaned forward. "Then who is?" João took a long drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling between them like a ghost. "The people who are supposed to stop them. The guards, the warden, even some of the politicians. They're the ones supplying the weapons. They're the ones arranging the fights. They bet on who'll survive. They make money off the chaos." The revelation hit Mendes like a punch to the gut. If what João was saying was true, then every death, every mutilation, every act of unspeakable violence was orchestrated by the very people sworn to protect the inmates. Pedrinhas wasn't a prison. It was an arena. And the inmates were nothing more than gladiators forced to fight for the entertainment and profit of corrupt officials. But Mendes needed proof. He needed evidence that would stand up in court, evidence that would bring down everyone involved. João gave him a name, a guard who kept records, who documented everything because he believed one day someone would expose the truth. His name was Marcos Pinto, and he was still working inside Pedrinhas. 3 days later, Mendes arranged a meeting with Marcos inside the prison. It was risky, impossibly dangerous, but they had no choice. Marcos agreed to hand over a flash drive containing video footage, financial records, and detailed logs of every orchestrated killing that had taken place over the past 5 years. The meeting was set for midnight in the prison's administrative building. Mendes arrived with 2 other agents, their weapons drawn, their nerves on edge. The hallways were dark, silent except for the distant sounds of screaming echoing from the cell blocks. They found Marcos waiting in an empty office, his face pale, his breathing rapid. "You shouldn't have come," Marcos said, his voice barely above a whisper. They know you're here." Before Mendes could respond, the lights went out. In the darkness, they heard footsteps, dozens of them, moving quickly toward their position. Marcos handed Mendes the flash drive, his hands shaking violently. "Get out. Get out now." But when they opened the door to escape, what they found waiting in the hallway changed everything. Standing in the hallway were not the inmates Mendes expected, but 5 guards, their faces hidden behind tactical masks, automatic weapons raised and pointed directly at the federal agents. These weren't ordinary prison guards. Their stance, their weapons, their coordinated movement, everything about them screamed military training. Behind them, in the shadows, Mendes could see more figures, at least a dozen, blocking every possible exit. "Drop your weapons," the lead guard commanded, his voice cold and mechanical. "Drop them now, or Marcos dies first." Mendes's mind raced through the options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in the heart of the most dangerous prison in Brazil. But the flash drive in his pocket contained evidence that could bring down an entire network of corruption. If they surrendered, if that evidence disappeared, then every victim, every murdered inmate, every family destroyed by this place would never see justice. "We're federal agents," Mendes said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You kill us, and you'll have the entire government hunting you down." The lead guard laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "The government? Agent Mendes, who do you think pays us? Who do you think orders the killings? You're not investigating corruption. You're threatening a business that makes millions every year." That's when Mendes understood the true scale of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just a few corrupt guards. This was an organized criminal enterprise that reached into the highest levels of state government. Politicians, judges, law enforcement officials, they were all part of a system that transformed human suffering into profit. Pedrinhas was just one piece of a much larger operation, and they had just walked into the center of it. Suddenly, Marcos moved. He lunged forward, grabbing the lead guard's weapon and pushing it upward just as the trigger was pulled. The gunshot echoed through the hallway like thunder, and in that moment of chaos, Mendes and his team ran. They sprinted through the darkened corridors, bullets ricocheting off concrete walls around them, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. They burst through a service door and found themselves in the prison's main yard. It was past midnight, but the yard was alive with activity. Hundreds of inmates stood in organized groups, weapons in hand, watching them like predators watching prey. The gangs had been alerted. The entire prison knew federal agents were inside, and everyone, from the corrupt guards to the gang leaders, wanted them dead. Mendes spotted the main gate, 200 meters away across open ground. It was their only chance. "Run," he shouted, and they bolted across the yard. Behind them, gunfire erupted from multiple directions. One of Mendes's agents, a young man named Carlos who had a wife and newborn daughter waiting at home, fell to the ground clutching his leg. Blood pooled beneath him. Mendes stopped, turned back. Every instinct screamed at him to keep running, but he couldn't leave Carlos behind. He ran back, grabbed his wounded colleague, and dragged him toward the gate. More gunshots. More screaming. The chaos was overwhelming, suffocating. They reached the gate just as reinforcements arrived from outside. Federal tactical teams stormed the prison, engaging in firefights with the guards and inmates. In the confusion, Mendes, Carlos, and the remaining agent escaped through the gate and into waiting armored vehicles. As they sped away from Pedrinhas, Mendes looked back at the prison, its walls silhouetted against the night sky, smoke rising from fires that had started during the gunfight. But they had made it. They had the evidence. Over the next 3 weeks, Mendes and his team worked around the clock analyzing the contents of the flash drive. What they found was beyond anything they'd imagined. The videos showed guards setting up fights between inmates, betting thousands of dollars on the outcomes. Financial records revealed payments from state officials to gang leaders, ensuring that certain inmates would be killed while others were protected. There were even emails discussing which journalists needed to be silenced if they got too close to the truth. 23 guards were arrested. The warden was taken into custody. 3 state legislators were charged with conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Mendes had done it. He had exposed the truth about Pedrinhas. But on the day the arrests were made, Mendes received a phone call that made his blood run cold. It was from Marcos, the guard who had given him the flash drive, the man who had risked everything to expose the corruption. Marcos was supposed to be in protective custody, safely hidden away until the trials began. "They got to me," Marcos whispered, his voice filled with pain and fear. "I'm in the hospital. They poisoned my food. Agent Mendes, you need to know something. The people you arrested, they're not the ones in charge. They're just the middle management. The real power, the people who created this system, they're still out there. And they're coming for you." Before Mendes could respond, the line went dead. He tried calling back, but there was no answer. 2 hours later, he received confirmation that Marcos had died from multiple organ failure caused by an unknown toxin. That night, as Mendes sat in his office reviewing security footage from the hospital where Marcos died, he noticed something that made his heart stop. In the background of one frame, standing near the entrance wearing a doctor's coat, was a face he recognized. It was someone he'd seen before, someone who'd been present during official briefings about the Pedrinhas investigation. It was someone from inside his own agency. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone realized, and now Mendes knew that he wasn't just fighting corruption in a prison. He was fighting an enemy that had infiltrated every level of the justice system itself. As he sat there in the darkness, staring at the frozen image on his screen, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It contained just 5 words, but they were enough to confirm his worst fears. Your daughter walks home alone. Mendes's hands shook as he read the message again. Your daughter walks home alone. It wasn't a question. It was a threat. They knew her routine. They knew where she lived. They knew everything. He grabbed his phone and called his ex-wife, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear the ringing tone. Maria, listen to me carefully, he said the moment she answered, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. I need you to pick up Sophia from school right now. Don't let her walk home. Don't let her out of your sight. Rafael, what's happening? You're scaring me. Just do it. Please. I'll explain everything later. He hung up and immediately called for a security detail to be sent to his daughter's school. Then he grabbed his weapon and ran to his car. As he drove through the streets of São Luís, his mind raced through every possibility, every connection, every person who could be the mole inside his agency. Someone had been feeding information to the conspiracy from the beginning. Someone had been protecting the real architects of Pedrinhas' nightmare. His phone rang. It was Maria again. Rafael, she's not here. Sophia never came to school today. The school called me this morning, but I thought she was sick at your place. Where is she? The world stopped. Everything around Mendes seemed to slow down, the sounds of traffic fading into a distant hum. Sophia was missing. His 15-year-old daughter, the only thing in his life that mattered more than justice, was gone. Another text message arrived. This one contained a photo. Sophia, sitting in a dark room, her hands bound, her eyes wide with terror. Below the image were instructions: come to Pedrinhas. Come alone. Midnight. Or she dies like the others. Mendes knew it was a trap. He knew they wanted to silence him, to bury the evidence, to make the entire investigation disappear. But he also knew he had no choice. He would walk into hell itself if it meant saving his daughter. He contacted his team and told them everything. They wanted to send tactical units, to surround the prison, to go in with overwhelming force. But Mendes refused. They'll kill her the moment they see any police presence. I have to do this alone. At 11:30 that night, Mendes drove through the gates of Pedrinhas Prison for what he believed might be the last time. The place looked different now. Quieter. More organized. The federal intervention had temporarily restored order, but Mendes knew the darkness still lived here, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the world to look away again. He was escorted by 2 guards, neither of whom he recognized, through the same corridors where he'd nearly died weeks earlier. They led him deep into the prison, past empty cell blocks, past administrative offices, down stairs that descended into the oldest part of the facility, a section built in the 1970s that had been abandoned for years. At the bottom of the stairs was a heavy steel door. The guards opened it and pushed Mendes inside. The room beyond was large, dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. And there, in the center of the room, was Sophia, still bound to a chair, tears streaming down her face. Dad, she screamed. Mendes started toward her, but a voice from the shadows stopped him. That's far enough, Agent Mendes. A man stepped into the light. He was in his 60s, distinguished looking, wearing an expensive suit that seemed absurdly out of place in the depths of a prison. Mendes recognized him immediately. Judge Alberto Costa, one of the most respected jurists in the state, a man who had built his career on being tough on crime, who had publicly condemned the violence at Pedrinhas and called for federal intervention. You, Mendes whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. It was you all along. Judge Costa smiled, a cold, calculating expression. Did you really think a bunch of prison guards organized this on their own? Did you think they had the connections, the intelligence, the resources? Agent Mendes, I've been building this operation for 20 years. Pedrinhas generates 40 million reais annually. The fights, the executions, the betting, it's all broadcast to wealthy clients around the world. We turned Brazil's worst prison into the most profitable entertainment venture in South America. You're a judge, Mendes said, disgust dripping from every word. You're supposed to uphold the law. The law? Costa laughed. The law is whatever those in power say it is. And right now, I have the power. Your investigation arrested some low-level players, but the system remains intact. The politicians you charged will be quietly released. The guards will be reassigned. And in 6 months, Pedrinhas will be back to business as usual. Then why am I here? Why take my daughter? Costa's expression hardened. Because you're the only one who won't let this go. You're the one who actually believes justice matters. So I'm giving you a choice. Walk away. Destroy the evidence. Tell the world the investigation was a mistake. Do this, and your daughter goes free. Refuse, and you'll both disappear, just like Marcos, just like everyone else who threatened my operation. Mendes looked at Sofia, at her terrified face, at the innocents that shouldn't have to witness this darkness. Then he looked back at Costa. You've already made one mistake, Judge. And what's that? You assumed I came alone. At that moment, the steel door burst open. Federal tactical teams flooded the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Costa reached for a weapon, but he was too slow. Within seconds, he was on the ground, handcuffed, his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. Mendes ran to Sofia and cut her bonds, pulling her into his arms as she sobbed against his chest. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. But as they led Costa away, the judge looked back at Mendes with a smile that sent chills down his spine. You think this ends with me? Agent Mendes, I'm just one node in a network that spans the entire country. There are 10 more prisons just like Pedrinhas. 20 more judges just like me. You won't live long enough to stop them all. 3 months later, Rafael Mendes was awarded a commendation for his work exposing the Pedrinhas conspiracy. Judge Alberto Costa was sentenced to 42 years in prison. 17 guards received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. The operation that had turned Pedrinhas into a death arena was officially dismantled. But Mendes couldn't forget Costa's final words. And when he received a folder on his desk marked "Confidential," containing reports of suspicious deaths at a prison in the northern state of Para, deaths that followed the exact same pattern as Pedrinhas, he knew the judge had been telling the truth. The darkness hadn't been defeated. It had simply moved to a new location, found new victims, new operators, new protectors in positions of power. Mendes opened the folder and began to read. His daughter was safe now. She was living with her mother under protection, far from São Luís. He'd sacrificed his relationship with her to keep her alive, but it was a price he'd pay 1,000 times over. Because someone had to fight this. Someone had to stand between the innocent and the monsters who preyed on them, even when those monsters wore badges and black robes. The investigation was far from over. In fact, Mendes realized as he studied the reports from Para, it had only just begun. And this time, he wouldn't stop until every last one of them was exposed.